Oh, there's nothing in this world worth giving up your peace of mind, be it bread and beer or walls and roof from rain. But there comes a time to claim what's yours from thugs and thieves and fools, and I say it's time we took it back again.
Dummies.org, and today is Wednesday, October 31st, and we're here for episode 182 to launch a new talk show, which is going to be called Free the People, and that talk show ID is 303-5044, and that's going to be done by Chris and Maria and Bill on Alaska. Chris has a newspaper, an online paper up there that you can find at Free the People, AK for Alaska. When I first saw it, I was thinking free the Peel, please. But I've known Maria for quite a while. I don't know. It's got to be at least 4 years, maybe 5. And her husband Bill and Chris and I just met this year, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I'm really happy they're here, and they've got some great stuff. One of the things I said, I just started this brand new WhatsApp group a few days ago. It might have been 2 days ago. It wasn't very long ago, and I started it off by saying, I'm not doing any more shows about theories. If you don't have proof that you're doing what you're talking about, I don't want to even hear about it. I went on this long rant, and you can't see it if you just get in the group now. And that new group is D2thing the Dragon. That's the new WhatsApp group I set up, and it's really just for people I've known for quite a while. So if you hear this recording and you get a hold of me, I'll probably put you in there because there's not too many people invited to this that I haven't known for quite a while. But I may have forgotten to add you to it, or maybe we're not contacts on WhatsApp. My phone number, if you wish to get a hold of me there, is 603-396-1092. And my email is on the website at redressfordummies.org. There is a tab that I set up for Free the People on redressfordummies.org. There's a page that I set up for Chris and Maria and Bill, so that I'll give you guys a heads up. If you're looking to find them, you can find at least enough information to get in touch with them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys and let you just go on from here. I'm going to mute the board I'm going to mute the board now, and the chat board and so nobody can interrupt. So when you're ready, just let me know, and I'll unmute the chat board, and I'll give people the opportunity to unmute. But for now, I'm going to mute everybody that's not a moderator. So it's going to be just the three of you for until you tell me otherwise.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Chris Ripple. I was born on the state of Texas in 1974 in a town called Pasadena. I've been living on the land of Alaska now since, I guess, going on about 9.5 years. And quite a little bit of living between the two, obviously, and has kind of give us some good points of view. I'm a co-publisher of freethepeopleak.com, but we pride ourselves in actually having a print newspaper, which puts us 10th in the state as far as copy circulation. We're doing about 3,000 copies up to twice a month. It slows down a little bit over the winter months. We've been poking a lot of bears and trying to teach people through giving a good cross-sectional view of the community. It's a public public publication, so people from all across the boards. We've even published both sides of the story in the same editions, and people are like, "What are y'all doing?" It allows people to stand up for what they say. I've been, in the last 3 years, trying to fend off the borough and give them some lessons in law, while claiming harm against myself and my family, as they've been trying to charge tax on my property that I own a land patent on, and has since filed a loyalty patent as well. You can kind of learn about this if you go to freethepeopleak.com, and underneath timeline and the categories, you can pop up everything in the timeline of events that's transpired in the last little bit, some of which is they tried to foreclose on my property unlawfully, and everything that's transpired since then. My home was burnt down approximately 2 days before the auction was supposed to have happened. And while I was watching my home burn down with two troopers, state troopers here, they were having an assembly meeting in town. This was on a Thursday night at the Fairbanks North Star Borough. It's not even a county. And they shut it down because they said there was a threat made, and they leaked my name out. This was published through the borough via internal emails, as well as on the Daily News Miner, which is our local propaganda rag up here. Whole other story. And it's kind of been backed up since then, but they came out and they have caused me harm as well by slandering myself. And since then, it's just kind of been a transition day to day, but I'm kind of got to beat back. And luckily, I've got some background behind me and some filings that I've made, declarations and things, that have allowed me to keep them at bay so far. And that's along the lines of where I come from. I've got quite a bit more I can share sometime. How about you over there?
I guess we'll tell you a little bit about ourselves, Bill and Maria. We've been involved in trying to learn and educate ourselves and others up here in Alaska since shortly after we got here. Bill moved up here in 2001, just before 9/11, and the first time I visited him up here was about a month later. And he asked me, "Hey, 9/11 just happened. Are you sure you want to fly?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm coming up to see you, and I think it's probably going to be the safest. The airlines have been for a long time, so I'll come now." And came up here and moved up 3 years later after we were married, and we've done a bunch of stuff around. We had started out with the Interior Alaska Conservative Coalition, which was a true coalition of different people that we felt like shared our values. That was a pretty political organization, and since then we've learned about common law, studied common law, and moved completely out of politics and just trying to share with people and revitalize, restore common law in the country, because we just believe it's our true law form. I'll let Bill talk a little bit too, which is pretty rare.
Yeah,
Here
I think Maria covered it pretty well.
Anything you want to say, honey?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. So that's pretty much par for the course with Bill and I. I hope this can be a pretty informal conversation, but we want to kind of focus on what the topic is for the night. And so this past week, Chris was down talking to our friend Chuck, and Chuck's been rolling with the punches, let's just say, for the last 25, 30 years. And so I guess what happened, Chris, was you mentioned maybe having a radio show.
Yeah, definitely. My first meeting with the Common Law Group was approximately 3 weeks ago, I guess. And since then, I had met this other new member, Chuck, And I've got to say, between some of the members at the first meeting and then when I met with Chuck this last Saturday, I was just absolutely floored. There's such a vast wealth of knowledge, and all of these people, for the most part, are in their 70s and 80s. And that right there is a flag. It's showing that a lot of this is kind of dying off. These are the histories that have been untaught and being dropped down in the memory hole, so to say. So first thing that came to mind was, we got to get these people on air. And so that's kind of what started the conversation.
Yeah, and what Chuck's going through right now is a series of where he moves his property from point A to point B whenever he wants, wherever he wants, and he's 75 or somewhere in there, and he keeps getting arrested and thrown in jail for 10 days at a time. But he's making progress. Things are changing, and he has seen a whole bunch of changes going on. So eventually we want to get him, to talk about what his experiences have been, what his wins have been. I don't know if he's going to be on tonight, but if he's on tonight, he can talk about his stuff. But so backing up a little bit, once Chris talked to Chuck last week, we kind of got together and said, let's go. Let's do this because it's time. And so today, Gus and Bill and Chris and I had a conversation, and Chris started telling Gus about his experiences and what he's done dealing with his DMV registration and the driving license. And
right.
So, we thought
sorry to interrupt, and I got to go back and say thank you because, I've kind of seen this through the years, and I've learned from a gentleman by the name of William, the Honorable Mr. William, from Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, who's very big into the driver's rights and common law over in Hawaii, which they've got a pretty good little movement going on. And then again, with Maria, whenever she forwarded me a video by a woman by the name of Jackie Figg, Figg, it just really kind of blew me away, and it just was that little bit extra I needed push on top of what I had been dealing with the borough and the state on the level of tax theft. So I went straight on down to the DMV office. I had already killed my registration to vote a while back, but I just went in there, and basically I'll read out what I told them. I kind of did it on the fly, but they required me to write something out. And I said, I willfully surrender and forfeit any and all transactions with a private corporation known as, quote-unquote, State of Alaska, DMV, State Troopers et al. I am a man living under the kingdom of heaven, not of personhood. I wish to surrender all privileges strictly related to or knowingly tied to the corporate bond and contract, including my PFD, except for my PFD benefit, which is owned by the men and women of the Alaska state, not the state of Alaska. All rights reserved. Also with my autograph in UCC 1308 signed underneath it. They validated it, and it's signed, and it was also processed by one of the managers there as well, had seen it and signed off on it. At the same time, I told them I no longer wanted anything as far as in the books as far as my registration. So they went through and they deleted everything in the system showing a registration and put notations on it because of the residual, whatever I guess they have in the system that hangs on. And also got a letter from them stating the same on August 2nd of 2018. To whom it may concern, Mr. Christopher Michael Ripple came into the Fairbanks DMV today and asked that a message be placed on the following vehicles' boats. And it lists a couple of the past registrations I had. The following message was added to the records and mentioned vehicle boat listed above. Registered owner wishes not to renew registrations or have any further correspondence with the DMV. Also signed by the office manager. So I got 2 pieces of paper that if I ever get pulled over for any reason, I can show them. But I've been driving without plates on my vehicles now for going on 2 years, and I've not been stopped once. But, you know, we've had some other circumstances of going on within our state, so I don't know. We've also noticed within the last couple of years that there's been very few people being pulled over. And go ahead.
I was just gonna mention that you went into the DMV this year, right, in August?
Correct.
So
correct.
Some of it, you know, it's still to see what happens if you are ever pulled over. Because
right.
you really haven't, you've been going for 2 years, but it really isn't a result of you rescinding your contracts with the DMV.
Yeah. Right.
Those are just.
But I've not.
Yeah.
I've not been harassed, and also with the situation since I terminated any contact between the state and all their sub-corporations, that also includes the fire marshal's office, which is a separate entity under the DMV, under the state troopers, also located in the DMV office in Fairbanks, Alaska. And since then, I've not been able to get in touch because I'd like to have a copy of a fire report since they were supposed to do an investigation on who set fire to my home. And it just seems they won't get back in touch with me anymore. I had to file a notice of liability about them to get my phone back that I voluntarily gave them to prove that I was nowhere near whenever this had happened. I was out delivering newspapers in town 25 miles away, and it took over 2.5 weeks to get my phone back while having a fire and trying to rebuild my life. So, you know, I gave them notice of harm, and they jumped over themselves to get my phone to me. I tell you, that notice of liability, it's a pretty good little hammer.
Yeah, and that notice of liability is the one being used now in recent years by Empower Movement to deal with pushing back against the smart meter technology. But
Absolutely.
That can be adapted to whatever it is you need to adapt it to.
Absolutely. Now, the thing with the Empower Movement, it's very well written, and it's very much geared strictly towards the smart growth, especially the smart meters. We started getting involved with that a little over 1.5 years ago, and actually had notice of liability from our local power company through the state all the way up to the governor, including the lieutenant governor, because they're head of the power board for the state. And we've gotten as far as round 3 as far as that goes. But I've got to tell you, the Empower Movement, it's beautiful, it's very complete, but it's very lengthy, very time-consuming. I really don't think it has to be that time-consuming for most other uses. It can be very short and sweet. Notice you're causing me harm. Anything you want to tell them, any kind of laws you want to back up with it, short and sweet. You don't want to over-volunteer.
Absolutely, yeah, and that brings us right back to the concise writing that Gus has taught me about. Gus has taught Bill and I. Spent a lot of time teaching us how to be concise and in our writing and write properly. And so, and to a couple short sentences, and you pretty much can say what you need to say. I wanted to go back also. Speaking complicated and overcomplicated to the Jackie Fig video. She's the red-haired lady that is on the Minivan Jack channel, and that guy, I can't think of his name right now, but his YouTube channel's Minivan Jack, and he does this really great video, probably everybody has seen, with Jackie Fig talking about all the kind of commercial stuff she did in the state of California to let them know that she didn't qualify as a driver. And, that I think that can just be done very simply the way you did your letter to the DMV, and you're basically just saying, I'm rescinding my signature, my autograph from any forms I've ever filled out for you from the beginning. So you basically take it all back. rescind your signature and say that there's no more contract. There never was a contract, because what you've done is now you've realized that you've entered into some kind of an agreement where there was something within that agreement that they didn't disclose, you didn't understand, and so there was no meeting of the mind. So you have lawful basis for rescinding that.
Absolutely. Even under their UCC law, which they're bound by, they absolutely have to produce the contract, and they can't produce a contract. And anything from the beginning done in deceit is unlawful to begin with. So,
right. So
we kind of get caught up in the trees a lot of times, and I think this happens across the board from politics to whatever. They get you really hyper-focused on something stupid that, you're trying to split hairs over this or that whenever they're driving off with a forest, And we need to kind of keep that in focus sometimes. Sometimes we don't need to prove every little detail of what they've done wrong because it's all been wrong.
Yeah, definitely. There was I was watching Billy Thornton last night, and that's, I guess that's where I started. Or maybe, I'm not sure if it was Carl Lentz or Bill Thornton, and then eventually, then we started listening to Terry Dodd's show, Walls in Our Minds. And he had a great guy, Ron McDonald, on his show. But so I go back to all of these things from time to time to get back down to what the basics are. And Billy Thornton was basically talking about, he was talking about a case between a corporation and an Indian tribe. And it was in regards to this idea of sovereignty, that if you sign some kind of a commercial contract and you don't reserve all of your rights, it doesn't diminish your rights. You're just signing a contract for one specific purpose. And, you still, this case basically says you're, trying to show that the Indian tribe signed away all his rights is just flies in the face of the whole concept of sovereignty. So it's a great case, and I can cite that again at some time. I don't have the site right with me. I've kind of gotten out of the habit of using these sites, but the idea is that even these, however you look at it, I look at U.S. citizenship as being corporate citizenship, and basically you've basically given over you've exchanged your rights for a fistful of magic beans, basically, or for whatever kind of benefit you're getting. And
for the right to be a slave.
Yep. So, but you look at these court opinions and their opinions, and even the least of the least and the lowest of the low, these U.S. citizens have these rights. And so how much more freedom must we have as the top of the pecking order? So that's one thing we focus on a lot, is figuring out how to get out from under these contracts that we're presumed to have gone into and back up to our place where it's supposed to be in the pecking order. I thought that Billy Thornton interview brought it home. So thinking more about what's going on with you, Chris, there's a little bit broad foundation that you've laid in order to be left alone. You want to talk about any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a lot of documents that I had filed with under Anna von Reitz's stuff. As far as, let's see, I'll get a couple of them here, about taking my name back. So the certificate of assumed name, notice of transfer of reserved name, is a really important, I think, a pretty important document to file, because it's taken back ownership of all different variations, forms of your name, whether it's the corporate straw man, the municipal strawman or whatever, however many divisions of trees they put out. These are all not you. You are a man or you are a woman, and these are all just fake names. These are all accounts that are set up, trust set up in your name. The largest one is the all caps name, the one most people know, the strawman. That's the Fed. That's the big boy first. They fed off of you as soon as you were born and took your birth certificate and trafficked you to the British Virgin Islands. And I kind of wonder how much that has to do with what's under the underpinnings of the new Trump order that seems to be blowing up the last day or so. There's definitely some undertones that could be disconcerting, or some tones that could be very good, which seems like most of the things that's happening right now. So that's one of the things you can talk.
Yeah, and I thought we'd maybe even do a complete show on just that idea that you've been misidentified. It's not you that's been misidentified. You know, it's you're exactly who you've always been.
Right.
You know, you were born to your parents. They gave you your name. We're talking about derivatives that have been done by commercial entities that try to be able to talk to you, the man, as a commercial entity by giving you a particular name form so that they can address you as another corporation. And that's the quick and dirty understanding of it that I have. But people can read. They can read as much as they want to on that, basically on birth certificate, the implications of your birth certificate. They can read Franco Collins or listen to Franco Collins. You can read all of Anna von Wright stuff. You can read, between the lines on some of Billy Thornton's stuff and Carl Lentz's stuff as far as listening to the one that sticks with me the most is the I am not you idea. And I've actually used that. We were in court for. We've been in court on two different situations, two different cases in which we were named defendant. So we were in the courtroom one time, and I was looking at the magistrate, and he said something about you, and I looked at him and I said, I am not you. And he turned bright red, and his entire disposition changed. And if you believe that demons occupy people, you probably would have seen a demon right then and there. And then he got composure of himself, and he turned back. He's, a white-skinned guy with white hair. He turned back into this nice little magistrate that he always is. And it was amazing. I have never seen anything like that in my life. And I basically think he realized that we understood that the gig is up. And he felt like the gig is up. What am I going to do now if I can't get joinder between the man, Bill Rensel, and all of these derivatives? And so that kind of taught us, you kind of go into court and you deal with some things, and you find out, okay, all right, we're on to something here. I'm sure a lot of people have had that experience. So anyway, that you read between the lines of Bill Thornton and some of the Carl Lentz stuff and Gus's stuff, and you realize, this is really how it's working.
Absolutely.
And, you get some confirmation.
You're exactly right. Sometimes it's what comes out. Every time what comes out of our mouth is the most important thing. That's one of the things I've ran into the most is every time they try to slam a door in my face, it's always been the excuse, well, you didn't say anything about it. You didn't complain. You didn't, whatever the excuse is, but they're usually all the same, basically meaning you did not come forward and stand your case and complain. Like with the taxes here, one of their excuses they tried to use on the taxation thing is, while they tried to continue coming forward on me, is, well, you didn't come in and complain. And it comes back to like even tickets, like a speeding ticket or whatever they would try to charge you with, to bond with you. They give you a certain amount of time before the court date. Well, that's the time that you're supposed to be complaining. So the subtleties in responses hasn't been taught. So hopefully we can work through a lot of those.
Mm-hmm. And just the basic concept, we were talking about this the other day on the phone in regards to the guy who walked into the gold assayer's office. You want to tell about that? Oh,
yes. This was actually just yesterday. So I had, I sponsored by Oxford Assaying in Fairbanks, great local company. They deal with all the miners up here, especially. But this guy must be a process server or something, and I don't know how he figured it out other than they're our sponsor. So he walks in and he talks up the lady in there, and basically said he was kind of looking to get in touch with me, and he wanted to serve me some papers, but nobody else was willing to do it because they were afraid I was going to shoot their asses off. And that's not me. I'm not a criminal. I'm not an evil person, but I am willing to defend myself if my life is threatened. So he left his name and number, and once basically it sounds like this may be a ploy to just to kind of get me out to where they can try to serve me, I guess. At the same time, whenever I had called her to see what was going on, she says, "Yeah, you've got quite a few backers here in the state so far. A lot of miners have got me backed up because they really appreciate what we've been doing with the newspaper. Getting it out. We try to get it out to as many of the little local areas like Central, the gold mining areas and things, as well as send it north on the Hall Road up to towards Prudhoe. A couple of the stops up there through Coldfoot and the bridge." As well as some of the villages if people are going out. We send stuff down south as well. But so we've garnered a following, and I'm not going to say that was the only reason I helped participate in starting the paper, is to get some notoriety and give me some clout before this stuff transpired. But I'm going to say it didn't hurt. It's definitely we're the number 10 paper in the state now, coming from with no budget, no budget or anything, right? It's just all of us working together as people to give away to our community. So interesting things.
Yeah, and one of my points on that was when you called to tell me about this guy, she had given you his phone number and you were supposed to give him a call. And so I brought up offer and acceptance, and so basically him giving her your phone number was an offer, hey, he's offering his phone number and Chris can either accept it or reject it. And when if he ever comes out to the property and he holds out a piece of paper, if he comes over to Denny's tomorrow night and he holds something out to you and you reach out to take it, we've got offer and acceptance.
Exactly.
And that's just so basic. Yeah, we don't see it. We've not been trained that way, but once you start to train your eye towards offer and acceptance, you stop being as accepting.
Yes. They shall be known by their symbols and signs. It's absolutely true, and these are signs and symbols. These are the way they try to pull off these tacit agreements. They're very underhandedly. They dishonor them right off the bat. These people are incredible liars, thieves, and cheats, whether they know it or not. We've all kind of been suckered down this road, and sometimes we don't understand when we act unlawful against our brothers and sisters.
Yep. And I mentioned Denny's tomorrow night. We've had a common law study group that's met for the last 2 to 3 years. We started out in our church basement, and then we moved over to Denny's in Fairbanks. And so every once in a while, we try for once a month, but we don't always do it once a month. But we get together at Denny's and meet in person, and that's where Chris first met Mr. Jim and Chuck and well, I don't know where you first met Wendell. You knew Wendell, but there's a bunch of us that go over and have fellowship basically and talk about what we know, what we've learned.
Absolutely.
So we're doing
cover
that.
Quite a few fronts.
Yeah.
We cover a lot of fronts. There's a lot of knowledge that's contained within that space whenever everybody gets together, for sure.
Yeah, and then eventually, Fairbanks is an interesting place because a few years ago, Schaefer Cox got rounded up with 4 or 5 others, and they did a huge smear campaign and with the paper, calling him a sovereign citizen, and got all these guys. And Schaefer's still in prison. He's been there for 6 or 7 years, and he's got a huge sentence that's absolutely ridiculous for a guy that's never even caused a paper cut on anybody, as far as I know. I was doing a lot of his paperwork, so I didn't see any paper cuts myself. So anyway, so we saw this happen here, and it really cooled the conservatives. Let's just call it conservatives, or what do you call those people in Fairbanks that are man on the land types?
The silent majority. Well, that's the 85% of the borough that doesn't show up to vote.
Yeah.
For the most part,
And all the people
85%.
all the people that voted not to have a borough 3 times before the borough decided, well, we're going to ignore you and we're going to incorporate anyway. I guess the state did that, yeah. So Alaska was set up originally, I guess, with I'm a latecomer, I admit it, so I can't really, I can't talk about the old days because I wasn't here during the old days. But I invite people who want to talk about the old days to come on and talk to us about them. But I understand that there were 3 votes and the state put in the borough, but when it was built, Alaska was first settled with mining districts. And there were actually counties lined out, but when the Constitutional Convention met to write a constitution in order to be accepted as a state, the Secretary of State of the United States wrote a letter to Alaska and said, you won't be having counties, you'll be having boroughs. And there was an agenda to have a model constitution for Alaska that basically promotes socialism. So that's why we have all the resources are owned in common for the common good. You don't have subsurface mineral rights, and we have commonly known as people are paid to live here, but what we know it as is the permanent fund dividend. So you've got all the resources owned in common, and then every year you get a check for somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 per person, per man, woman, and child who live here. So if you hear Alaskans talking about PFDs, that's what they're talking about. But then I've looked at that language with a jaundiced eye and seen we had to quit applying for that permanent fund because the words in that application for your dividend check are, first of all, are you a U.S. citizen? And secondly, are you a permanent resident? And so look at the word resident and look at what that means. That basically means a person who comes from another place to engage in commerce for a temporarily until he returns back to where he's permanently domiciled. So I think permanent resident is also an oxymoron. anyway, so that's just kind of like my 2 cents about life
The
up
permanent
here.
fund. Yeah,
The
the permanent fund
yeah.
too. Obviously nobody's getting rich because we're extorted out of 2 to 3 times that in fuel costs up here. So, it's kind of been hush money from the oil companies, kind of pushed in a way, I think, to kind of keep people floating along, because the cost of living up here is ridiculously high, tied to energy and everything else. Like, we have a pipeline running through here in Fairbanks. Everybody knows about the pipeline, I'm sure. And the pipeline is, it doesn't actually generate a lot of revenue for the borough because they can't be charged on the land that they owned. I learned this from the guy that was the running mate of Joe Vogler just recently, and I hope to have him on a future show. It's patent property as well. So they only get to charge on the pipe itself for the borough. The state, the PFD, gets charged on the amount of oil that goes through there, and however they do all their calculations. But on this trip between Prudhoe Bay up on the north all the way down to Valdez to the terminals, there is no kickoff here to where we can have our own refining up here. So we ship our oil to Canada, which processes it and drives it on a truck across the Alcan Highway all the way into Alaska to go right back into a fuel tank that's literally 100 yards or 3 miles away from the pipeline. Yeah, so there's a lot of little things to look at going on up in the state. It's like everywhere. We've all got our dirty little secrets or things we know or can see but can't put our finger on. And it's pretty interesting here, to say the least.
Yeah, the other thing that's kind of interesting, I was telling Gus about this today, in regards to living without license plates or driving licenses. It's kind of interesting that we're separate from the lower 48. We're separated by provinces of Canada and Northwest Territories that aren't part of U.S. territory, let's just call it. And so we all know that when you're an American, you can travel from one state to another without having to go through any border crossings. So how do you deal with that if you're an Alaskan and you want to cross the border, you want to go from your American state, Alaska, to your home state? Ours is Utah, and there's all these Canadian provinces in between. How do you get across the border without having a passport? And so last year, this was a question. My family was very horrified that I've stopped using a driver's license several years ago and don't have a passport. So I thought, okay, well, this is a really good test. I'm going to travel. I didn't travel by car. We didn't go by car last year. We went by airplane. But I'm going to go from Alaska to Utah, and I'm not going to renew my driver's license, and we're not going to have time to do anything about a passport. We're not going to give up by taking a passport. So what I did was I just basically stood on my right to travel from one state to another. I'm an American, and I know I can travel from the state I'm living in to my home state to see my family. I know that. I know that's something that's an equal protection for U.S. citizens. I know that this is how we've been operating since forever. So I went to the airport to talk to basically the head of the TSA at our airport here. And long story short, I can go into details, but basically I got on the airplane with my Sam's Club card and went to Utah and came back from Utah with my Sam's Club card. I don't have a passport and I don't have a driver's license. So the moral of this story is very, very simple. If you kind of push through these issues, try to educate yourself about what's going on top down. But really what you've got to do at the end of the day is you've got to stand on what you yourself know. And I think that's that's basically what you're doing with your notices, Chris, and your the notice that you've placed over your VIN number on your truck.
Absolutely. They like to make contracts without recognizing it so much. So I gave them a little contract right back by placing a notice of contract on the front windshield of my truck. I don't know if it got included on the show notes this evening, but it's basically a $200,000 contract for anybody trying to mess with, tamper with, remove, look at my stuff wrong, whatever, And it's a binding contract.
It's on the screen right now.
Perfect. And a $250 per day until it's resolved contract. And this has been noticed, and it goes from top to bottom and bottom to top. Everybody's noticed on this deal. So if somebody wanted to come and put something on your vehicle, say a ticket, a parking ticket, a stripe, want to move it, tow it, whatever, you've got a contract against them. This is actually fixing to be in the process of being used, I believe, with Wendell. You had mentioned earlier, part of the common law group. But he's got a lot of issues. He's also under attack from multiple faces, too, and one of which is GVEA, our local, supposed to be a cooperative energy company that was sold out, under the table to Touchstone Energy, which is a Rothschild-owned company, all of them. And they still call it a cooperative, which is a total joke, and they are rolling out the smart meter agenda. So the way this is dealing with Wendell, he's, 76 years old, I believe. He homesteaded a piece of property off the Chena River in the 60s. He's been a member of the Golden Valley Electric Association since 1969. Never missed a payment, never late on a payment. Homesteader, great guy. And just recently, with all this rollout of the smart meters and things going on across the country, they wanted a piece of his property. And there was finally an opportunity for them to say there was an emergency on repairing one of the lines to try to pressure him into giving them a huge section of his homestead to have free access to at any given time to anybody, any contractor, any person they say can go. So it totally opens his property up. But part of the way it was written by the lawyers that run this company, which I got to say, every one of them make more than the President of the United States, up to over $500,000. So they're not paid for what they're doing. They're getting paid to shut up and roll this agenda down. So they cut his line. They cut his power off. Going into winter, 76-year-old man, lives by himself on his homestead, and he's been putting it together, but he's been very strong. And he's getting some help by Representative Tammy Wilson continuing on contracts. But he had me help him write a notice of liability against them, because they're causing him harm. Absolutely causing him harm, and also breaching contract. So a lot of stuff going on with that guy. I'm sorry, I lost where I was going.
Yeah, just
Hey, Maria.
Yeah.
Would you talk about the omnibus, the thing you were talking to me about this afternoon, the omnibus, whatever it was, and how they changed a whole bunch of stuff all at the same time?
Yeah, the omnibus crime bill. It was Alaska Senate Bill 91, and I was going to start out, I was thinking about talking about that and just ask you to be thinking about how to answer this, Gus. When there's a law in one state, how it applies to the others, and I'd be really interested in hearing your answer to this. But SB 91 was passed. It was a bill that came through Pew Charitable Trust, and I have that from Lance Roberts, who was on our assembly. It's an undisputed fact, and all the state actors know that Pew Trust sent this bill. The legislature played around with it, got public comments on it, but basically it was passed in totality, and that was reducing the reasons why you can throw a man in a cage up here. And basically, we were made aware of it by Anna von Reitz in a personal note back when Pope Francis, his first day in office. In his first day in office, Anna happened to write to me and say, you need to look at the Pope's first apostolic letter, his first act of being in office. In that letter, he wrote that there were going to be reforms and that people at the highest levels of government were going to be held accountable for crimes against humanity. So this is 3 years prior to July 1st, 2016. And Bill and I are looking at this going, this lady, is she, come on, what does the Pope have to do with anything that's going on in our country? So we suspend disbelief. We keep that in the back, tucked away in the back of our minds. And supposedly this letter by the Pope, which I have in Italian and in English, and I'm happy to share it with everyone. I'll share it sometime. We'll do a show about it or whatever, but I'll share it. I have newspaper clippings that I went and got off the internet that day talking about Francis's first apostolic letter, the implications it would have across the system. I read this letter, and it didn't look like it was anything. It just was like very, very mild to me. So in the meantime, I get arrested for moving my property from point A to point B. I got a little Subaru. I never registered it. It was, it still had the registration plates from the former guy who owned it, but it was original equipment to me. And I also never renewed my driver's license because I realized, hey, some of this contract is based on fraud and I'm not going to participate. So got pulled over, was arrested, was going through the court cases. And so I was hanging around downtown at a coffee shop downtown where all the prosecutors and lawyers hang out downtown. And right prior to July 1st, this 3-year mark that Anna had given us, I hear all the prosecutors in the office going, oh, God, in the coffee shop, talking about how horrible this bill was that was coming through, SB 91. This bill was going to allow criminals to run free. And if you had it was going to be DUI reforms. It was going to be bail reforms. It was going to be changing basically how much bail money these natives they had been imprisoning would have to pay to be able to get out. And it had implications on the driving without a driver's license. It used to be a misdemeanor. They would pull you out of your car, throw you in jail, be really awful to you, prosecute you, and it was a real serious offense. And now it was just like a moving violation. And that's what it is today. In fact, our governor, the guy who's running for governor, and I don't know if they've had the election or not, but he was campaigning on reforming this bill, making this bill go away. This bill isn't going, these new laws aren't going anywhere. The fact is they're coming to all the states. They're coming to the entire system that across the American states where the governments have been incorporated, which is all of them. So all of your moving violation, all of your driving license misdemeanors, and all of this, using that as an excuse to throw you in a cage, that's all going away. The DUI laws are going to be reformed. They're not going to be able to hold people. They're not going to be able to do the types of things that they've been doing. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just the basic idea is that you can't throw people in cages so easily anymore. And the other thing I'll say about this before we ought to probably open up for questions and comments really soon, but what we're hearing from conservatives that we always rubbed elbows with in regards to this SB 91 is that the cops won't do anything anymore because the amount of money, and I'm trying to figure out how to get the wording on this right so I can communicate it properly. But if somebody steals something that's valued at less than $750, it's no longer theft. So if somebody takes a car, and it's you know, I think a big part of this is crazy. And this is one of the things that's crazy. If it's kind of like the South African, black people can take over the white farms. We're not going to prosecute for these low-level property thefts. And part of the rationale there is just if you're poor and I'm wealthy and I have something that you need, you can come take it. So, I don't support that part of the bill, but that is part of it. That's part of it. And also when somebody is taken into custody for whatever reason, it used to be if a $5,000 bond was posted, the guy had to have, I don't know how much he had to have before, in fact, but now he has to have 10%. So on a $5,000 bond, he can post $500. And as long as he's not a threat to the community, he can get out on 10% of the bond. And we are definitely seeing that. If you sit in court, you'll definitely see that happening. And we have been seeing that come to pass right before our eyes ever since July 1st, 2016. So anyway, comments, Chris?
No, you're absolutely right. It's created a whole system of theft here, and you're absolutely right about the police. They will not show up anymore. You can pretty much call them, and they'll say fill out a police report, and that means not them coming to you. That means you go into the police station and you go file a police report. I've been told this time and time and time again. It's absolutely true. I think this kind of falls back with, ties into the same time frame that we started noticing that there was a whole lot, in fact, almost non-existent vehicles being pulled over and ticketed anymore. So it's probably part of the thing, the SB 91.
Yep. Should we take some questions and comments and stuff?
Sounds good. You want to open her up, guys?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? I don't know if I'm muted.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right. So if you hit *6, you can unmute yourself. *2 to raise your hand. And Robert's got his hand up. I'm going to unmute you, Robert, and just hold on a second. And one thing that Chris was talking about, when you get pulled over and you get your summons, your paperwork, whatever they give you, and then there's a court date set. If you look at the paperwork, there's like when I got the last one I got from in Utah, it says right on there, do not respond within 72 hours. And if you know anything about contract law, 72 hours is the time you have to let them know you're not interested to nullify the contract. So that's one thing. And the very first thing I do when I get that paperwork is I write to them and let them know that I have a right to settle privately with whoever it is that's making a claim against me, and that I require their contact information along with a verified claim so that I can settle up. I wish to remain in honor. I'm getting in touch in good faith with clean hands to settle this so I can resume the quiet enjoyment of my life. And so that's number one, is I have a right to settle privately. And if I am not able to settle this privately, then I require that same information, the contact information and the claim and so on, so that to be on the record at least 90 days before you set up any kind of a hearing, number one, so I can try to settle privately, but also because, I wish to subpoena the man or woman who says I do wrong. And so, it's that, before that first hearing, you need to nail some stuff down. Don't wait till you get there. Do exactly what Chris is doing. Do whatever it is you're going to do long before you ever get there, and give them notice of what you expect when you get there. And with that, Robert, just give Chris or Maria a chance to answer, and then as soon as they're done, just ask your question.
I was just going to say that is awesome, and I hope Wendell's on the call listening to you, because he's got something right now he could use that with.
Yeah.
Well, I have that paperwork available. I mean, I don't put it out there because it's just standard stuff for me, but I'd be happy to have that conversation with him.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. All right. I'll make a note of that.
Mhm. There's a lot of people who call, and they're Gus, how much for an hour of your time? I'm like, well, it depends on what you're talking about, and just about all the time. Well, I've got this going on. I'm like, that's no big deal. Let's just talk about it now and get it over with. And that's typically how most of those conversations go. It's gotten to where it's real simple stuff. Who's my accuser? I wish to settle. I need that information. Don't schedule anything without my consent. It's just some real basic stuff. The writing part of it's a little bit more technical, but still, I mean, you're a man. You have a right to say it whatever way you wish to say it. All this jumping through hoops and getting everything 100% accurate, and everybody's terrified to make mistakes is bullshit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yep.
Yep.
This is my tribute to Christy Moore. There's nothing in this world worth giving up your peace of mind, be it bread and beer or walls and roof from rain. But there comes a time to claim what's yours from thugs and thieves and fools, and I say it's time we took it back again. And it's down, deek, down, down. It's down, deek, down, down. Down, deek, down, deek, down. But you wouldn't give your freedom for a pocket full of corn, and you wouldn't hug your honor just for growth. Oh, you'd never ask another to forgo his chance at love. So don't you give a thought to play the fool. Well, ambivalence and indifference and all that kind of thing never turned a pauper to a king. Now we're waiting for the fox to lead the chickens home to roost. That ain't no song that we should ought to sing. Then it's down, deek, down, down. It's down, deek, down, down. Down, deek, down, deek, down. Yes, it's time we took a long, hard look at what we really need, and just who it is we pledge allegiance to. Though it's hard to strike a balance between politics and peace, just tell me what else you've got to do.